20,000 Tamils had been massacred on the beaches of Sri Lanka,
Right.
and the world ignored it. And this is according to certain news agencies who monitor the UN have actually said this, the Sri Lankan crisis this year had been Obama's major international conflict, and obviously Hillary Clinton and others have actually taken steps. They criticized the Sri Lankan government. They've traveled to Sri Lanka. David Miliband has traveled to Sri Lanka, and they've recently on Friday the U.S., France, and Germany got together and said that they weren't going to approve the IMF loan because of the gross human rights abuses of the Sri Lankan government. Mm-hmm. So they recognize that the Tamils are facing a really brutal regime, a brutal state that is intended genocide, but at the same time, we're looking at geopolitical issues as well. So obviously, the Tamils internationally don't have many friends, and I think it's with China playing a regional role in that.
Sure.
There's a lot of controversial issues.
Well, we were speaking before the show, and I asked Ranjit this, and Vijay, I'll ask you the same question, and both of you can answer. Will there be a peaceful resolution to both the situation that the Tamils face and the Khalistani movement? Will there be a peaceful resolution for both?
We hope so, as soon as possible. I mean, that's what we're working for as a British Tamils Forum. We're trying to lobby parliamentarians and trying to kind of get the world to recognize that the Tamil nation on that island has the right to self-determination, and it's for the people there in the north and east of Sri Lanka to decide their economic, social future. And if you suppress them through military means, then you're not going to have peace, and you're going to have this constant resistance.
Do you think that sometimes violence is needed to make a point, to move forward, to when communication and democracy and being diplomatic has failed? Do you think sometimes we need to resort to violence?
Can I just come in there? Just picking up on Vijay's last answer, I'd like to endorse that before I come on to your question.
Sure.
Self-determination is not just a slogan. It's actually a mechanism for the peaceful resolution of disputes. And it's underpinned by democracy. You spoke about the consent of the governed to determine their own political, social, economic, cultural future. So that's the message, and that's the blueprint that people like us need to get across, because that is the only way to resolve these conflicts. There is no way that there will be a military, permanently be a military solution to conflict zones where you have struggles for national liberation. And
well,
the reason the reason national liberation movements, I think, are worthy of special consideration is because, just taking away the legal ramifications of this whole debate, if you go back to the morality of the situation, where you have people who are forcibly, and the word forcibly is very germane here, it's necessary to recognize that where force has been used to deny a people their natural rights, i.e. the right of freedom, self-determination, in those circumstances, those people are a special case where they are entitled to protect themselves. Now, there are provisions in international law that cover this. There's the right of self-defense. There's also, specifically in relation to self-determination movements, a provision made within international law for the right to resist forcible suppression.
Well, anytime a nation feels it's under threat, where it's going to be divided into little pieces, or part of it is going to leave, is going to be cut off, they're going to oppose that, and there will be aggression both on the part of the person, the movement that's fighting for its freedom, and the nation who's stopping that from happening. We're talking about freedom or freedom fighter or terrorist. You're watching Broken Silence. We'll be back after this short break. Hi, welcome back to Broken Silence. I'm Sanyya Gardez. Today we're looking at terrorism and freedom fighters. If a nation is defending its cause and its principles, it's counterterrorism. But if the people are trying to stand up for their movement, it's terrorism. Joining me on the panel is Vijay Jayant and Ranjit Sarai. Thank you both for joining us. We left off with why isn't the international community doing more than it is doing for the Tamil Tigers, for the Tamil cause, for the Khalistani movement? I mean, we stepped in Iraq and made it a world issue. Why isn't the world community doing more for your causes, the movements that you're involved with?
I think it's down to self-interest, and there is a paralysis when it comes to solving these problems, because
do you think solving is too ambitious? Will there ever be a real solution to either one of these scenarios? Just one easy solution?
No, I personally believe that obviously I agree with him that there's self-interest. But if you look at, say, recent examples where, if you look at Kosovo, for example, the world, we know that Tony Blair was the one who actually pressured Bill Clinton into actually intervening in Kosovo. And they went in, and far fewer people died in the final conflict in Kosovo than in Sri Lanka this year.
Right.
But they went in on a humanitarian purpose, and they got the NATO involved. And they had this, and now Kosovo is independent, and even though Russia is against it, the US and the UK have actually recognized Kosovo's independence. So when they want to do it, they can do it. And to save people, well, they've got their own interests. So what we believe is that in this case, if we can, that's what we're lobbying, and we feel that if we can,
do you think race plays a factor in who the wider world community is going to help and who is just going to stand back and let them solve itself?
Yes, race and geopolitics. If for example, the regional players in the Indian Ocean believe that Sri Lanka has to be united, then that's what all the other countries, Europe and America, is going to go for their economic interests. But if they feel like in the Middle East that one country is more favorable, then they'll probably, or in say Kosovo, where that particular regime or it's going to be more favorable to them, then they'll support them. So it's actually looking at self-interest, economic interest, and they use the magic word terrorism where they want to.
Yeah. Well, looking at India, it's becoming a huge player in the world's economy, and it's becoming a country to really reckon with and take notice of. Do you think now the world community will step in and say, let's look at this movement and see what we can do about it?
It's going to happen. It'll have to happen. Remember, India is not just contending with the Khalistan issue. There's Kashmir, which is a self-determination struggle. There's Nagaland, which is a self-determination struggle. There are also freedom movements running in Assam and Manipur. So if you look at that, if you look at the context of India, India is, after all, an artificial state, which was brought together as a legacy, if you like, from the colonial past. But the pressures in there, the national pressures, even the Tamils down in the south. We've been talking about Tamils in Sri Lanka, but the Tamil national 50 or is it 60 million people living in Tamil Nadu, they themselves consider themselves a nation. Maybe not engaged in a freedom struggle.
Speaking on behalf of, looking at the side of the Indian government, if they decide that, every state that has its own language and its own culture should then become its own country, where will that leave India? What will be left?
Well, that's a good question, and it should have been answered by the Indian state back in 1947, when, having come into being, it should have recognized the various nationalities, the various rights. So the Sikhs are a classic example. The Sikhs tried to achieve self-determination within India. It's not necessary that self-determination has to be in the form of a separate independent state. That's currently the position as far as the Sikhs are concerned. That is our aspiration now, given all that's happened. But back from 1947, there were so many attempts by the Sikhs to secure autonomy within India.
Peacefully attempts.
Absolutely
so
peacefully.
So then do you think that when you have exhausted all your peaceful options, you've tried sitting down and debating it and discussing it and compromising, when all of that is gone, is it justifiable then to resort to violence?
Well, I think what really justifies resistance is the forcible denial of self-determination.